Today on the LA Food Podcast, is work-life balance possible in fine dining? What the heck is postmodern craft beer, and why should Angelenos care about the passing of Famous Amos founder Wally Amos? James Beard-nominated reporter Gab Chabran is with us today to explore all of these topics and to tell us why he believes the city's best tacos are in Whittier, and where you should consider heading next time you're craving sushi or in need of Japanese pantry goods. Our interview today in part 2 is with Chef Daniel Shemtob, the founder of the Lime Truck and Hatch Yakitori in downtown LA. Daniel's most recent venture is called Snibbs. Snibbs is bringing cutting-edge and rather good-looking work shoes, I might add, to professional kitchens. Daniel saw a big hole in the market for stylish, functional footwear after slipping in the kitchen and missing the opening of his own restaurant. Daniel exudes entrepreneurialism, and this is a deeply inspiring conversation for anyone who's ever even thought of starting a business or who's even remotely interested in foot health and or fashion. Don't say we don't have range on this podcast. And oh yeah, did I mention that Daniel won 2 seasons of the Food Network's Great Food Truck Race? Yeah. I'm your host, Lucas Servodio, and without further ado, it's time to chow down. Dear listener, I made a deal with my wife. She let me start a food podcast and eat ungodly amounts of noodles, pizza, sandwiches, and more under 2 conditions. One is that I never utter her name. The other is that I find ways to be healthy outside of my work in food. Being the fantastic partner I am, I found a few ways to up my health game. I exercise almost every day, I try to sneak in salads for lunch whenever I can, and I only ever snack on healthy foods. The macadamia nut has become an essential part of my daily routine with the best omega-6 to 3 ratios in the nut game, 8 times better than pistachios and 20 times better than cashews. At houseofmacadamias.com, they've got a bunch of different macadamia products that you can enjoy, like savory and sweet snack packs and chocolate-covered snack bars. One of the problems with macadamias I've found is that they can be expensive, but I'm solving this for you, dear listener, because as of today, all you've got to do is head to houseofmacadamias.com and use code LAFood to get a 10% discount on a healthy snack that also happens to be delicious. So what are you waiting for? Head to www.houseofmacadamias.com/discount/LAFood and go nuts. Welcoming back to the LA Food Podcast, a man that Father Saul should be very afraid of. It's the associate editor of food and culture at LAist, Gab Chabran. Gab, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Luca. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm great. I'm actually in Las Vegas. I don't know if you can tell from my background.
Oh no, I thought that was the regular office setup. That's right. I saw you were over at Best Friend recently.
I was, yeah, many more Las Vegas reviews to come. But Gab, thank you so much for making the time for us. You are the first person to actually do this segment of the podcast where we run through headlines other than Father Saul. So this is an LA Food Pod history-making moment right here.
Well, it's an honor, and I hope I do Father Saul proud.
You don't need to do him proud. You just need to do me proud. You know,
Fine.
I'm
Fair,
the one who
fair.
sends out the invites. You know.
Gotcha. Fair.
How's your week going? Have you had any good food?
Yeah. I'm working on a little piece actually about seafood in the San Gabriel Valley, and I hit up a couple of really great spots. One of them being Yama Seafood. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this spot. It's been around for over 40 years, and I think it was recently taken over by some new ownership. And they've since expanded the brand. They have locations in West LA. They'll also be opening up another location in Koreatown. But essentially what it is, it's a fishmonger slash Japanese grocery store. And so in addition to fresh cuts of fish, which you could, take home and do with it what you like, they also sell some really excellent sushi trays, combos, platters that kind of thing. And I got to sample a few of them. And, I'm not the biggest sushi head by any standard, especially in a place like Los Angeles where there are people who are far more qualified to talk about something like that. But just the freshest melt in your mouth, sushi, that I've experienced in recent memory. And I've been meaning to kind of get out to that place for a minute. One of the photographers that I work with at LAist, Brian Feinsheimer, he's mentioned it to me more recently to come and check out too. And they had actually reached out, and I was working on the story, and so it just kind of lined up perfectly. Great little grocery store too, as well. So lots of great ingredients if you're looking. Great sake selection, Japanese beer, but also just like knickknacks too.
Yeah.
They had, and I'm kicking myself for not getting this. They had like these stickers that were like these anthropomorphized rice cookers, which I'm like, my moleskin could really use that, but just another excuse to get back. So
Yeah, not to mention your daughter, right? Like she's like a perfect Christmas gift or whatever birthday gift.
it's true. It's true. Yeah. So I got to get back
You
there.
got to stockpile on those things when you have the opportunity to.
It's true. And then pick up a quality bottle of sake too while I'm at it. So
Yeah, why not? Do you when you go to a place like that, are you looking more for like pantry ingredients, or are you more so there and sort of let inspiration strike for like an upcoming dinner or lunch or something like that? Like, oh, that fish would go nice with the dinner we're planning tonight.
yeah, I'd say it's, really just where I'm at mood wise as far as that goes. Pantry selection is always, a big factor for me. I think I based my whole identity on my pantry section or my pantry at home. So I picked up some really great chili crisp that I was, in the market for too. They had these cute little bottles, like miniature size bottles of Kewpie mayo too, which,
Mm,
I almost purchased one of those just for the sheer novelty of it.
yeah.
I didn't purchase any of the booze unfortunately this time, but I feel like that could be something to explore a little bit more into. And then, of course they had like chips and ice cream novelty, and they had different
Hmm.
types of soy sauces, and I mean, you could literally get lost. And the place isn't even that big, to be honest. And it was during the lunch rush too, so it was packed, but a great experience all around. I mean, anytime you can grab a bite and also do some shopping, I think is, win-win.
Win win win. How big are we talking? Is it like Japanese shoppy shop, or is it like is it small grocery store?
I would say think of a shoppy shop and then add a fish counter to it, a small refrigerated fish counter,
Hmm.
and that's pretty much it. Yeah. So and I was asking the employee who I met with that day who was showing me around. I said, "Well, are the other locations like the West LA location, which has a little more of an expanded menu? Like apparently you could do like sake selections there
Mm.
and what have you." I said, is it a little bit of a bigger footprint? And he was like, actually, no, it's pretty much the same. So,
Hmm.
but that one sounds cool too, because they actually have like tables and chairs at the West LA location to sit and enjoy your sushi and also crack open a bottle of sake if need be. So maybe you and I should do that sometime soon.
That sounds awesome. And Gob, let me tell you why I'm loving this, especially because one of the pieces of feedback we get on this podcast is that we are too East Side focused.
Okay.
You've just given us a huge West Side tip that I don't feel you hear about very often in other places. So you're winning already, dude.
Well, hey, I think I'm a diehard East Sider at heart. I come from Whittier, the which I like to refer to as, the east of East LA. I mean, that's where I kind of, got my comeuppings as it were. But since moving to Long Beach and then having a stronger access to the 405 freeway, I find myself, kind of venturing into those parts more. So it's just another reason for folks to kind of, explore a little bit more, get out there, maybe change neighborhoods, every decade or something, just to kind of,
Absolutely.
keep the mind fresh and tight and, explore new things. So yeah, West Side all day.
West Side all day, not words I thought would ever be uttered on this podcast, but alas, here they are. Hey, how does a story like that, since we actually have an actual newsman on the podcast today and we're not just like, guessing about the news like we usually do, how does a story like that, like the one you just mentioned, actually come together? Is it a mix of like, you kind of brainstorming ideas and people reaching out to you, or was there like a hook for one of these?
It's actually a combination of the two things you just mentioned. So an LAist audience member wrote in and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for more seafood restaurants in the San Gabriel Valley. What do you got, you know?"
Hmm.
And so that's when I start picking my own brain and trying to think of, different selections on what to choose from, and and always, you want to go for a nice little variety. So Los Angeles being such a diverse place, very easy to do so. So, I kind of pulled from a couple different places, Yama Sushi being one of them. The other place I visited, Newport Seafood,
Mm-hmm.
which is another sort of, long-standing establishment in the San Gabriel Valley. Excellent sort of Vietnamese slash Chinese inspired seafood. And then I also grabbed some oysters too, as well. And let me tell you, some oysters on a hot day really hit the spot. It's light, it's refreshing. Just that little bit of brine and flavor, on your palate. Can't say enough good things about it. So
Yeah, where were the oysters from?
the Dive Oyster Bar in Temple City
Mm.
on Rosemead.
Okay.
So just a little pretty small spot. Oysters aren't necessarily their specialty. They do a lot of Southern inspired, types of food too. They do gumbo and things
Mm.
like that too. But the oysters were pretty on point, I have to say,
Mm.
being very fresh, especially in a landlocked region like the San Gabriel Valley. So I was pleasantly surprised.
I was about to say that myself. Like SGV isn't the first place where oysters come to mind. Then again, after having spent a few days in Las Vegas and having, being offered oysters here, the SGV feels like Malibu compared to this.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Hey, well, Gab, it is Friday when this podcast comes out, and I know that LAist is famous for its Food Fridays. Is there anything coming out today on Food Friday that our listeners should know about?
Yeah, so today we have a story actually based off of a call-in segment that I did with Austin Cross. And this is in response to my Whittier taco piece, which I know we're going to get into in a second.
Mm.
And basically, it was folks who called in and recommending their favorite taco places as far as that goes. And so we got some really great responses, and I really appreciated all the folks coming in. Nobody came in and said I was absolutely crazy for coming up with my story, so that was nice of them.
Well, let's get into it then, because that is a story that I wanted to talk about today, and that's one you wrote
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago now, which came across my quote unquote timeline, if we can still borrow a phrase from 2005, and it definitely stopped me in my tracks because it made quite a bold claim. And basically what you were saying is that Whittier, the east of East LA, is home to LA's best tacos. For folks who haven't had time to read the piece yet, what are the points that you made that are working in Whittier's favor?
Well, first off, I start by saying I'm biased. Okay, I have to, I grew up there, and it's an area that I'm very familiar with, and so I wanted to get that out of the way. I'm a homeboy, from the area, so obviously I'm gonna think it's the best in that respect. But furthermore from that, and I didn't talk about this too much in the piece, as it were, but I just started to think, in line with some of the other famous listicles that have come out recently, the 101 taco list that LA Times published right before. There's also the Bill Esparza list.
Who?
Just this guy named Bill Esparza. He posts on Instagram pretty frequently on his stories. You should check him out. He's got some interesting takes.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out sometime.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And LA Tacos list, obviously, too. They've done a lot of great coverage on Whittier too. At the same time, I have to give a shout out to Sean Vukin, who did a really great Whittier taco roundup. I think it was last year or something like that. And Sean's a friend also, and he's done some freelance work for us also. And so I wanted to kind of take all of that in consideration. So it was really interesting when I was reading the 101 taco LAT list, because it felt like there were a couple of Whittier mentions on there too. And for me, it felt like Whittier really kind of boasts the fact that there are lots of quality taco places kind of within the city limits, and they're all within
Hmm.
kind of, within close quarters of each other. Not to mention, they also sort of have a variety of different styles. And so, for that reason, and that reason alone, I was like, this is part of the reason why I think it's a place for some of the best tacos in LA. You could definitely hit two, three, or four, or five even on any given day, just to try some of the difference. And I also kind of came at it again, as being somebody who was from there. I had some nostalgic favorites, Chemas Tacos being one of those places, which was actually one of the first places I ever tried a taco
Hmm.
in my memory, and they're only $2, and it's run by a father son, and that place recently was in the news in by some folks because they're going to be actually opening up a King Taco next door to it.
Ooh.
This has some people worried about, its fate because it's a place that's been around for over 40 years, And then you have some newer spots too that have also come to town recently. The expansion of La Carretera, the food truck based in North Long Beach, has just set up a brick and mortar off Washington Boulevard in Whittier, and has been met with much fanfare. So there's just a lot going on there, and I just thought it would be worth kind of capturing some of that in the article, as it were.
You make a strong case. And is Tacos Baja also Whittier adjacent? Or is it actually in Whittier?
So there's actually two locations in Whittier, believe it or not. So
Oh wow,
Tacos Baja, I believe it started in East LA. I think on Whittier Boulevard, the original location. Correct me if I'm wrong.
that sounds right.
Yeah, and then there are two locations in Whittier. There's one in East Whittier, so more headed towards Orange County, which is in an A-frame, which was the first location.
Hmm.
And then they opened up one that was more sort of centralized. That's on the corner of Whittier Boulevard and Painter,
Hmm.
which is not too far away from my alma mater, Whittier College, where I got my bachelor's degree. Although it wasn't there when I was attending school there, unfortunately, that came a little bit later.
Too bad.
But some of the best fish tacos that I think you can find, especially for the price.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like between that Tacos Baja and Tacos La Carreta, those are like two like widely considered two of the more like we can talk about the value of authenticity, but they are considered some of the more like authentic representations of the regions in Mexico that they are trying to showcase, which is pretty cool to find in one single East LA city.
Yeah, and I also think the fact that, as the waves of immigration, kind of ebb and flow, and Whittier having a strong Latino population, I think it's somewhere close to like 80 or 90% at this point. It's also really interesting to see like how these different taqueros have kind of come and made these styles their own,
Hmm.
and I find that to be really exciting
Hmm.
too, as well. Whether or not it's authentic or not, is up for debate, I guess, for some. But for me, I find it extremely exciting, because I love the mixing of cultures, and I think Whittier is a great example of that,
Yeah.
where I don't like using the term melting pot, because I feel like it's a little bit of lazy shorthand, but maybe that's just like the writing brain coming out. I guess if you wanted to call it that, you could.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't think Melting Pot quite captures it even though, right? It's more so like this place has become home to so many people and they've been able to sort of like carve their own stories within this very unique context of different cultures. So, we need a better metaphor than Melting Pot in general.
Yeah, yeah. And I think furthermore, it continues to evolve too. I mean, it's sort of ever changing. As more people move in and other people move out.
Yeah.
Housing and property prices are all affected of this. And that opens up a lot of opportunity in that respect. So I think culturally speaking, it's just kind of a fascinating time for a place like Whittier.
Well, hey, I know when people drop lists, They usually are accepted without any questions. There's usually no pushback. There's no controversy. So I'm not expecting there to be any, but did you get any pushback on your assertion that Whittier is the best place for tacos in LA?
Kind of, but not really. I think I saw some like Facebook comments for some folks, but it was pretty obvious that they hadn't actually read the article, which is the reality that many of us, in online journalism, are having to face in that respect. So, but no, I found the majority of it, people were happy that I was kind of, giving my hometown its flowers, and more people wanted to go and seek it out and try the different places, as it were, and I want to also state for the record,
Mhm.
I just provided a snapshot. I mean, there are lots of other great places I think could have been featured on the list too as well. So, and if I had more time and energy, I would have gone much more deeper in that respect. So
It's funny actually, but people don't read the articles and lists at their own risk because I just had somebody write in one of my comments. It was on a list I made of the best pasta dishes I've had
mhm.
so far. They wrote, "Hey, I went to Pizzana and they didn't have the 72-hour ragu." And then I was like, "Oh my God, did I like mislead this person into going to this restaurant and expecting a dish that was a one-time special?" And then I reread the caption and we rewatched the videos. And I did mention that, but clearly that person had only glazed over and went there expecting something. So, guys, you got to pay attention when you're reading the articles.
That's sometimes a little too much work for some folks. But now I want to try the 72-hour ragu.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe they should send out a Google Cal invite or something like that once it goes up. I would love to try some of that. So
Or we have to start a petition to get Daniele Uditi to add it to the menu full time, and that's a separate conversation. But hey, anything else we should be checking out on LAist this Food Friday?
I also check in with Hangerbergs, the winners of the tournament of cheeseburgers, which was the burger contest that we hosted earlier this summer, and we had the big celebration at Smorg, and just kind of checked in with them and see how life was like, and they seem to be doing really well, and they're slowly expanding, and I'm just really happy for them. They're wonderful, nice people, and I think they deserve all of the praise. So shout out to Hangebergs.
Well, we'll put links to all of those in our latest edition of LA Food Stack, our free newsletter on Substack. And hey, by the way, speaking of Tournament of Cheeseburgers, did you see that I think it was silver medalist or bronze medalist, Yellow Paper, is getting their own brick and mortar?
I did see that at the. It looks like it's the old Mia's location in Eagle Rock, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, super excited for them. They're super hardworking folks as well too. So yeah, can't wait to see what they come up with.
Not going to say it's the LAist effect, but hey, yeah, just drawing a straight line.
I'm sure, we're one of many who help sort of boost them up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, but super excited for them.
Well, hey, Gab, while I have you, I wanted to pick your brain on a couple other stories that caught my eye this week, if you're down.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, one of the stories that came out, and it's actually a series that Eater has been working on for a little while, and that I've been reading, but haven't really had an opportunity to discuss in depth. It's a series that they write called Service Check. And what it does, it's meant to examine, quote unquote, the sustainability of LA's restaurants through the lens of service workers. So a lot of these series focus on like mental health and work life balance and things like that. And the reason I wanted to discuss this is because this week, Matthew Kang interviewed a chef who we've discussed on the podcast before, and that's Chef Ki Kim, the former chef of Kin, who's now the CDC at Meteora. Now, Kim famously shuttered Kin, citing burnout and mental health reasons. He's since gone on to work at Morihiro, and now he's found a home at Meteora. You've been to Meteora, right, Gob?
I have, yeah. I've been a couple times, but I was just recently there a couple weeks ago.
You're a fan, right?
I continue to be more of a fan, each visit,
Wow.
The first time I went, I think it was back in January, and that was more just sort of like a meet and greet. And, I think they were doing like some zero proof beverages because it was dry January, and also a couple hors d'oeuvres that were nice. But I actually got to visit this last time, and had some of the food. It was a collaboration with a chef from Panama who was there, in addition
Hmm.
to Chef Jordan Khan's team. And this was, I believe, the week of, or the week of they won the Michelin star at the same time too. So
Mm-hmm.
and so that was when I got to try a full tasting menu and knock my socks off. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty impressive,
Wow.
to get the full experience.
Well, you're whetting my appetite and making me increasingly optimistic about our upcoming dinner at Vespertine, which Father Saul has to pay for. So things to look forward to. But the whole reason that Chef Kim shuttered kin was he cited mental and physical health reasons. And I thought Matt Kang did a really good job in this article of digging into some of those topics with the chef. When he asked him the question about work-life balance, it kind of struck me that Chef Kim doesn't seem to have made a ton of headway in experiencing work-life balance. He himself was like, it's a really hard thing to do in fine dining. My question for you, as someone who, speaks to restaurateurs on a regular basis, do you think that his story is a one-off, or do you think that work-life balance is something that continues to elude folks in fine dining across the board?
Yeah, I think 100%, that's the case. I mean, I feel like we could point to, any single one example. And I don't think it's just, chefs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, front of house staff. I think it's PR people too, as well. And I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, you could even draw correlations between this and journalism too, if you wanted to, in that respect. And that's when you feel. I think it's part of the reason is when you feel so passionate about something, and it's something that you've strived so hard to get to, and what have you. That I think that keeping that balance, those lines get blurred. They go out the window like that
Yeah.
because it requires so much from you, in that respect. You put so much of yourself in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know personally, I don't know anybody who's successfully been able to do that. Especially, I would imagine for somebody who owns the restaurant too, which I saw he was partial owner.
Yeah.
And so I can only imagine the weighted pressure that puts on you, especially as a young person. I don't know what the exact age of Chef Kim is, but I would imagine he's probably somewhere, in his 30s or, something like that, late 30s.
He seemed to indicate he was like late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, yeah. So I would imagine that, with somebody with something to prove like that, that it could make it super hard.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because in another part of the interview, he brought up this sort of like tension between the notion that fine dining kitchens are a lot of work, but they aren't necessarily always toxic. And so it's sort of like, we associate like toxic working conditions with demanding everything from you and you not being able to achieve that work-life balance. He was basically saying like, look, it's a lot of work and you really have to pour yourself into it, but that doesn't mean that it's always a toxic working environment. And that sort of like brought up this notion to me of like maybe operating at fine dining at the highest level is a lot like being an athlete at the highest level. You sort of get like a limited lifespan of the amount of time that you can operate at the highest level, unless you're LeBron James, of course, and you do it for 20 plus years in the league. But basically you get like, if you're a football player or soccer player, you get 10 to 15 years where, like your work-life balance is going to be off because you are pursuing this thing at the very highest level. The thing is though, Kim brings up in the piece that it's like, it's not for everybody and it should be okay if you have to step away. But I do feel like sometimes the chefs who step away from that fine dining environment and go pursue something else are a little bit looked down upon. Like not always, some go on to do like some pretty cool things,
Yeah.
but I feel like there's a bit of stigma associated with like giving up. Do you feel that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's, sort of the quitter's notion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like it's a really double-edged sword, because while I think that there's this big push towards, mental health, not just, in restaurants and fine dining, but just, sort of across the board, for younger people of this generation who are trying to establish themselves as professionals, At the same time, though, I think media representation, delivers this whole nother type of message. I mean, I'm thinking about this most recent season of The Bear, and with Carmi's character,
Mm,
who I found, for the most part, to be pretty insufferable this season in that respect,
preach.
and I'm just like, I was like, this almost isn't enjoyable to watch, but at the same time,
Mm.
it's like it's supposed to be, we're lauding this person is supposed to be lauded, for all of the great work that they're doing in that respect, but if it comes down to it, it's kind of an asshole too, it's I feel like it's tricky, again, to kind of, have it both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is really hard to quote unquote have your cake and eat it too. But I do think there are some like really inspiring examples of people who have stepped away from fine dining kitchens and done some really cool stuff. Like one that comes to mind is Chef Eric Greenspan, who was running Patina for a really long time, worked in Michelin star kitchens, and has since stepped away and started his New School cheese brand. He's started his duck delivery project as well, which I think is a really cool like pop up thing that happens, and it's very inventive. But I think, I had the chance to speak with him at Coachella actually, and he was basically saying like, I'm just doing what I love now. I'm doing things like projects that speak to me. But I think that we should sort of like, I don't know, as media, not putting myself in that bracket, but like celebrate those people a little bit more who are able to find that like longevity. Maybe there should be awards that celebrate that don't just celebrate like fine dining. Maybe there should be awards that are for like, I don't want to say the quitters award, but you know what I mean. Awards that basically like reward pivots or something like that, or innovative ideas that are innovative business ideas. I think there's got to be something other than just Michelin, World's 50 Best, even James Beard, which, I think has moved away from just awarding like super fine dining establishments. Maybe that's a bridge.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it's something that these award bodies could consider, when highlighting things like, best restaurant or best bar, while the product is, essential, to, the prestige, as it were. I think that, looking a little bit further, and kind of examining, what is behind, some of these chefs and establishments that we tend to rise up because of these awards. I also want to give a quick shout out to another story that we ran last weekend by a freelancer by the name of Ezra Salkin. And they did a really great story about food pros and mental health.
Mm.
There are actually some organizations actually out there who put together different events that folks can tap into if they're looking for mental health resources, especially working in restaurants. And he provided a really great overview of what's out there. And I would definitely encourage folks to give that a read, not just because it's my own publication, but of course, just because it's relevant to what we're sort of discussing. And we also feature some resources on there too as well. So
I was going to say that feels very relevant and important because one of the things that I imagine exists is a resource gap here. Like, I'm not sure every restaurant is able to provide like incredible benefits that cover mental health. So I feel like having industry specific resources available is a huge asset.
definitely, definitely, and much needed, And so I think more attention we can kind of shine light on those things. I think the better off we'll be.
Well, hey, from mental health, we're going to pivot to talking about coping mechanisms, and that is beer. There was a great article in Punch, which is like Eater's offshoot publication, which focuses on liquor, written by Courtney Eisman on postmodern craft beer. Essentially, what we're talking about when we talk about postmodern craft beer is this sort of movement in beer where brewers are adhering less strictly to styles like Kolsch or wit beer and just trying to brew something good that just tastes good. It's an attempt to market beer to younger audiences, and it also involves simplifying the branding. I'm sure we all remember those like craft beer cans, like, I don't know, Sculpin and all these like ones with like skulls and dragons and like crazy illustrations. And now they've sort of like Gen Z-ified the branding where it's just like, the name of the brand, maybe some like light pink, some like camos or, some like earth tones, like
Love a good earth tone.
love a good earth tone. You can see I'm wearing like kind of like a little yellow jersey today. It's Gen's. Yeah,
Likewise,
you too. You're
likewise.
wearing like
Yeah.
what is that? A green?
Yeah, it's sort of like a granite,
Yeah.
a granite Carhartt, a little lighter for the heat.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. That's us trying to appeal to Gen Z on this podcast. Gab, from our previous conversations, I've gathered that you have at times in your life been a beer aficionado. Have you noticed a shift in beer that echoes the sentiments of this article?
Oh, definitely, definitely. One of my first jobs was actually working in a craft beer slash bar restaurant, So it was an interesting time when craft beer was just starting to come to a headway. And so that was starting to rise up, but there was also a lot
Mm.
of imported beers too, as well. So I remember, that's when like Newcastle was like, a big thing, and even more sort of like esoteric
Hmm.
things now, like Beamish and and things of that nature, so the Irish stouts. But anyways, I digress a little bit in that respect. So yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of craft beer, and then it sort of became what it was, And I think that, sort of post pandemic, we're starting to see a really interesting left turn in that respect, which some of this sort of article gets at. And that really kind of provides for beers that don't really adhere to a specific type of genre or anything like that. And
Hmm.
I, for one, I think it's super exciting. I think that there's a lot of, great opportunities out there to try something new. And it reminds us that even if we say we don't like a certain kind of beer, that we still might owe it to ourselves to try something, especially if it's something sort of fun and unique in that respect.
Have you had any of this like postmodern beer tradition, so to speak, that you found particularly enjoyable?
So I have this theory, this working theory, is that the best beer that folks can find right now in SoCal is actually in Orange County,
Hmm.
and there's some really exciting breweries happening out there that kind of, I feel like would kind of check some of these boxes that's being discussed in the Punch article. I'm talking specifically about Everywhere Brewery. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
I'm not.
They are based out of Orange, and they're in a little like business park essentially. But they do some really really exciting beers. I'm looking at their menu right now. On the lighter side, they have Pilsner and wheat beer and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of sort of touches on lots of different notes in that respect. You know, making nods to sort of traditional craft brews, but also kind of displaying something sort of wholly unique in that respect too. So
Hmm.
I would definitely kind of put them under that. And then also like the branding and everything that we're discussing, I feel like would definitely kind of fit under that sort of postmodern Gen Z, whatever you want to say too as well. And then the other thing is too, another one which I don't know if it would necessarily from a branding standpoint match up with what's being discussed, but Rip Beer, which has locations both in Sunset Beach and Huntington Beach.
Oh yeah.
They primarily specialize in IPAs, and I don't know about you, but I got kind of burned out on IPAs after a while, just because the heaviness and the hoppiness, and my palate just kind of went raw after a while there. But
I had one of those. I got drunk on them too many times, and just like now the smell of them like really brings back horrible memories.
yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about in that respect. But I would encourage folks to seek out some of their IPAs too, because they tend to be a little more nuanced, in their approach, and they're not super heavy, but they still maintain, a good amount of character in that respect. So definitely something worth to seek out too as well.
Well, Rip also famously has really good pizza.
Oh
They
yeah.
were at Pizza City Fest earlier this year, and they have that like Detroit style meets Sicilian almost square pie. So That's a pretty good tip for folks who like pizza and beer.
Yeah, yeah, they actually have pizza at both of their locations now. Originally, they were just doing it at the Huntington Beach location, but my family and I, we were down there at the Sunset Beach location, and they actually taken over one of the locations next door. So and
Hmm.
they've expanded some of theirs. So yeah, definitely worth a nice vibe if you're looking to hang out by the beach.
I love that. My favorite brewery branding right now probably is Homage Brewing, which has
Oh yeah,
locations in Chinatown and Pomona, I want to say.
yeah.
And friend of the pod, Lucky Nick's Pizzeria, Nick Camacho does pizza there a lot, and that's how I learned of Homage Brewing actually. But I still think that their styles adhere to like traditional craft beer styles. Like, you're still going and ordering a Pilsner or IPA. Like, I'm yet to see a brewery where I'm there and I'm just ordering a beer that, like, the description is like, it feels summery or it feels like, demure or cutesy. Um, but like the branding at Homage, what they've done is they've basically done a bit of a throwback to the LA '84 games,
Uh-huh.
and the LA '84 Olympics had these like famous like symbols of like the sports, and they basically like created one of those but for drinking. And I'm not sure it's like perfectly Gen Z, because I'm not sure how much Gen Z like identifies with the '80s, but their merch all feels kind of early aughts in general, and I feel like that's hot with Gen Z.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. When you were talking about, sort of beer that sort of tastes like, summery. Have you tried Solark Brewing? It's over there in your neck of the woods. Have you been over there?
Mm-mm.
I
No,
believe
where is it?
it's on Eagle Rock Boulevard.
Oh, it's the one right by Bub and Grandma's.
Yes, yes. Sorry. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
having a hard time. Yeah, yeah. So their stuff's pretty interesting and sort
Hmm.
of defies classification in a lot of respects, I think they opened up their tasting room last year. I think it was. I think we ended up stumbling in there on like the first weekend or something like that. They've got a lot of really interesting beers, and I think, they might sort of fit that classification of what you're discussing. So
Demure cutesy.
yeah, yeah, but also just kind of nebulous, and
Mm-hmm.
flavor. I don't even think they classify stuff as like IPAs or or wit beer or something along those lines. They kind of keep it open for interpretation. At least that's what it feels like.
I love that. I'm gonna have to go check that out. I've been meaning to. Their interior decor is kind of interesting. It looks like they've got like tinfoil on the walls.
I believe that's correct. Yeah,
So, it makes me feel like I'm avoiding the aliens when I'm in there.
yeah,
So I haven't had a chance to like go and fully drink there yet, but now it's on the list.
yeah.
But lots of exciting beer options.
Yeah, when you're in there, you can definitely avoid all 5G. So, that's definitely a plus.
That's good. I can stay away from everybody hitting me up on Instagram being pissed off about lists.
There you go.
Last article I wanted to discuss with you today, Gabi, you've been so generous with your time. A few different publications wrote about this, but the article that I found most sort of like encompassing was Eater's Mona Holmes. And it was about the passing of Wally Amos, the founder of Famous Amos. And she actually links into LAist coverage as well from 2019, exploring the backstory a little bit. But I wasn't really aware of just how intertwined Wally Amos is with Los Angeles. Were you familiar with the story of Wally Amos before this week?
A little bit. Yeah. I was definitely aware of his presence, and I know that he had been around, kind of well before I had sort of come on the scene, as it were. But but I will have to say though, I mostly knew the brand as, sort of a vending machine, cookie brand, in that respect,
Yeah.
of which I have enjoyed many bags of in my lifetime. But I knew he was definitely a thing back in the day.
I think we've all enjoyed our fair share of those bags. But yeah, listen, dear listener, in case you weren't able to read the story yet, basically, Wally Amos was a talent agent at William Morris who learned how to bake these like little cookies from his aunt to send to his clients. And they were such a hit that somebody convinced him to open up a brick and mortar, which he did on Sunset Boulevard in the location that is now Bossa Nova Brazilian restaurant. and started selling these cookies. And he really pioneered a sort of like marketing approach in the 70s of like creating block parties outside of his shop and like being kind of this like charismatic front man of the restaurant, sort of a la Victor Villa, to use, an example that's very much in the zeitgeist right now. And basically, these cookies became a massive hit. He ended up opening brick and mortars all around the country. At one point, it was grossing $12 million a year, which in the 80s was like more like $1 billion a year. And ultimately, there was a little bit of decline, and he sold the business off for $3 million, and it became the brand that we all know and love today as vending machine cookies. But it's a really cool LA success story.
Definitely, definitely. I feel like, well, like you said, we've got our Victor Villas and sort of in that respect, but I feel like it's a little few and far between these days when it comes to such figureheads like Amos in that respect. So I wish I was around then to experience that.
Sounds like hell of a block party. It sounds like Marvin Gaye.
Definitely.
Marvin Gaye was one of the investors in his original business, gave him $10,000. I'm sure he attended one or two block parties.
Oh man, imagine, I think there just seems to be more block parties, period.
I agree.
I think we need to bring that back.
We usually end this segment with something called Shitty Yelp Review of the Week, i.e. a time when maybe you weren't your best self this week. There's absolutely no pressure to partake, but if you really want to stake a claim for Father Saul's spot, then I just want to open up the invitation to offer a Shitty Yelp Review of the Week.
Sure. Now, when we say we were not your best self this week, could you give me a little more background in terms of what it is you're looking for specifically?
Absolutely. So this started as actually Father Saul's girlfriend's idea, Emily, because basically Father Saul had a bunch of moments of not being the best partner, i.e., for example, like, I don't know, having like minor meltdowns over insignificant things like, his new girl videos not loading on his laptop and things like that, or getting overly competitive at trivia nights and ruining entire evenings over them. So we realized these things were happening rather frequently for both of us. And so we each would share at the end of an episode an example of when we had one of those moments this week. It's since expanded, and it doesn't have to be strictly partner related. For example, I've talked about meltdowns I've had on the soccer field, or things I've done like just out at Trader Joe's, for example. It's just a moment where we're looking back. You were like, you know what, Gab, that was a 1 star. I could do better.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll be completely honest. I am kind of, when it comes to my home personal kitchen, I'm pretty bad, in that respect, and last night my wife was filling up our water dispenser. It's one of those ones that goes into the fridge,
Uh-huh.
and if she was resting it on a bowl in the sink and then knocked it over, and I probably wasn't my best in those few minutes after that fact, but yeah, I for some reason these days I'm really trying hard to keep a tidy kitchen, and I think it's kind of getting the best of me right now. So
it's the bear effect.
Exactly. Yeah. I was up till midnight washing the floors with my hands. No, I really wasn't.
Look, I think that's understandable. We'll give you a 3 stars, and it sounds like you're very aware of your behavior, so you got plenty of room to maneuver. I'll give you one real quick. I was at this restaurant last night here in Las Vegas called Wakuda. It's this like celebrity-driven sushi restaurant. I was doing it because I wanted to do a video on the best happy hours in Las Vegas, and they've got a killer happy hour at Wakuda. And what happened is we sat down in the lounge, ordered all our food, and we just ordered our food. So I'm like, this is a perfect time for me to go wash our hands. I go to the bathroom, and my wife sits at the table waiting for the food. Lo and behold, the food comes out literally the moment I leave for the bathroom. So she is sat there like with the food for like 10 to 15 minutes, instructed not to touch anything because I've got to gather all the content. She's texting me, the food is here, the food is here, the food is here. I'm in the bathroom, so my phone isn't even with me at the time. So I'm taking my sweet time, and I come back to the table. She is absolutely fuming because she has not been able to take a single bite because she knows how important the content is to me and how pissed off I would have been, frankly, if she had taken even one of those crispy tuna bites. Ultimately, I thanked her and was, very, very thankful that she waited. But is she absolutely correct that I would have been furious if she had dug into the sushi? Yeah, she's right. She knows me too well.
Mrs. LA Countdown deserves a gold star after that evening.
Yeah, Mrs. LA Countdown deserves way more than a gold star. Well, hey, sounds like ultimately this week we weren't too bad, but I'll tell you what, you weren't just good as a pod co-host today. You were excellent, Gab. So thank you so much for making the time for us.
Of course, man. Yeah, no, definitely. This was great. I love doing it, and you feel free to give me a call anytime.
All right, look out, Father Saul. Well, make sure to go check out all of Gab and his team's reporting at LAist. We'll be putting the link in the show notes and in our LA Food Stack newsletter. We'll be right back after the break with Daniel Shemtob of Snibbs. Dear listener, my wife recently decided to start eating meat after more than 15 years of being a vegetarian, and being the conscientious consumer that I am, I've been looking for ways to make our household's meat consumption as high quality and sustainable as possible. That's why I'm absolutely thrilled to have found First Light Farms, a small collective of passionate family farmers in New Zealand who are quietly changing the world. Not only are they producing the most tender, rich, and succulent Wagyu beef money can buy, but you can rest assured that First Light's cattle were raised as nature intended, living it up on lush pasture, eating a 100% grass diet with absolutely no grains, no animal byproducts, and no feedlots. The result is the best tasting meat in the game, full of natural marbling and packed with omega-3 fats. If you've ever enjoyed a meal at Ma2 in Beverly Hills, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ma2 famously sources all of its meat directly from First Light, and the good news is that you too can have First Light Farms meats delivered straight to your door. All you have to do is visit www.firstlight.farm, where you can buy their meats and also sign up for their members-only steak club. Members of the steak club enjoy tons of benefits, including monthly shipments of steaks, access to the highest marble score meats, and, this is my favorite part, access to First Light's full library of proprietary recipes and techniques. Also, you can cook the perfect steak within the comfort of your own home. Buying good steak isn't easy, and it isn't cheap. First Light delivers the highest quality at an incredible deal, and now that I've seen the light, I'm never going back. Visit www.firstlight.farm to learn more and use the code LAFood10 for a 10% discount on your first order. Welcoming to the LA Food Podcast, the chef and entrepreneur behind Hatch Yakitori, the Lime Truck, and Snibbs, a game-changing work shoe company behind what's destined to become the hottest clog in kitchens around the world. It's Daniel Shemtob. Daniel, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Luca. Thanks for having me.
Dude, stoked to have you. Where are you calling us from?
We're in Colorado right now. We're in my father-in-law's office, so they let me use it during the day, you know.
Dude, that's a sick office. So are you there for business or pleasure or both?
No, mostly pleasure. We get out here, and so I just learned the acronym work from home, so WFH. I get to WFH in a new city. So
wow, you must have been grinding hard if you only just learned that acronym. Dude, us laptop warriors, keypad warriors, we've been WFHing since 2020, my dude.
Yeah, I mean, is there like INC, or INK in the kitchen? Actually, I'm terrible at acronyms because that would be ITK. So let's take a step backward.
Hey, spelling is not necessarily the number one job requirement for what you do.
Yeah.
One question I love to ask all our guests in the culinary world is this: what did you have for lunch today?
Oh man, lunch today was okay. So normally my wife helps me out with lunch because I'm on calls all day, and so she went out with her family, and I found some leftovers. We had some skewers, and then I made this really like fragrant rice, and so I turned it into a stir fry, put a little egg in the corner, added some sambal, and made this like leftover stir fry for lunch, and it was pretty bomb actually.
Dude, that sounds incredible. And this was just like you working on the fly with what you had?
This was me on a call while I was making lunch in like 6 minutes. Yeah.
Wow. I'm ashamed to say that today I had a PB&J, and that's all I've had today.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, look, we can't all be chefing it up every single minute of the day, but I will have you know tonight I'm making like from scratch orange chicken or orange beef. Actually, that's what I'm making.
Okay, what kind of meat are you using?
I think we're using, dude, I don't even know, man. What? Here, let me look at the New York Times recipe. I think it's like a ribeye or something, but we're chopping it up. It'll be interesting. There's brown sugar. It should get caramelized.
I think when you make it at home too, yeah, the orange veal is way more fragrant and delicious, and I just love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, good for you, man. Okay, so you're more into the dinners, you know?
Yeah. Who has time to make lunch, man? I can't multitask
Seriously.
like you do.
I'm like, well, yeah.
Hey, Daniel, look, let's cut to the chase, okay? What the heck is Snibbs?
So Snibbs, I could give you the namesake, but I could share the story of what happened and why I created Snibbs. So 23, we won that great food truck race on the Food Network. I'm going to open my second restaurant in downtown LA. It's about 3 weeks from the opening, and I turn, slip and fall, slipped herniated disc, L4, L5, out cold at 23 years old in the worst pain of my life. And I know you talk to chefs. Chefs are not control freaks for the most part. I'm air quoting for those who aren't here with us, but watching someone else open your line is a very difficult
Mm.
experience because they don't do it the way you would do it, and you have to trust them in their process. And so I became really depressed. I went down this rabbit hole. Why isn't there any good footwear for chefs? Why was I wearing Vans in the kitchen and had that slip and fall because I wanted to look cool? And I just kind of started to realize like nobody is going to create these products for us because no one cares. Like, and the only people who care about it are the people in our industry, and someone's got to do something about this. And so it just put me on this journey of creating the best footwear. What I didn't know is that it would take me 5+ years and how difficult it is to create footwear from scratch. But I'll kind of shorten that story. And so went down that rabbit hole, partnered with a really famous orthopedic surgeon.
Wait. I'm actually interested in the details, okay? Because as someone who has a lot of ideas,
Okay.
but rarely ever make those ideas a reality, I want to know how you went from having this idea of, hey, we need footwear, to even making it a semblance of a reality.
Oh my God, man. So the first thing I did was I tried to find someone who could help me with it. And so there's consultants out there that help you create like tech packs, which is like a model that you can go out and get a manufacturer to make a shoe for you. But I mean, if I showed you our first sample, you would have died. I went to a really important meeting with that sample, so proud of it because it took me a year and a half to make. And the guy didn't even look twice at me. And I looked back at it and I was like, why was that guy so rude to me? I looked at the shoe and it was just the worst looking thing I've ever seen in my whole entire life. So, it's all people. I think the idea becomes more real as you involve more people and as you talk about it more and put yourself out there. And the more you kind of put your name behind it, the more it starts to create its own reality.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you just got to do at some point. It sounds like talking to people kind of gives you an added sense of accountability. It's like once you've spoken the idea, then you got to do it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And then also people who have done it, right? The first thing I did was I reached out to like 5 people who have created products, and then also some people who have worked in fashion and footwear. So that was another help too.
Yeah. So, okay, talk to us about the legendary Dr. Snibby.
I come up with the idea and I'm like, great, I can make it look good. I know I can make it good for you. Or sorry, I know I can make it good for like the our industry, like give back to our community, make it sustainable. But the one thing that I knew I had no business trying to reinvent the wheel with was foot health
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't think anyone was doing it to begin with. And what's so interesting is you look at all of these great shoes. There's so many brands right now crushing it in great footwear. They're all focused on athletics.
Mm-hmm.
There's not very many brands that are focused on other things. And if you think about a Nike or an OnCloud or any of these brands, and they're taking a shoe and they're using it for an hour. You go running, you're not running for more than 40 minutes, right? Maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half if you're a really long distance runner. But for the most part, that's when that experience ends. Someone who's working in a kitchen or who's working on their feet, they're there for 8, 10, 12 hours in really odd movements. Like when I'm in my kitchen, I move a little left, I move a little right, a little forward. And, the shoe isn't made for that. It compresses, it becomes really crappy. And so I knew by going to Snibby, this orthopedic surgeon who's, again, top of his field, like really one of the most prolific doctors, who actually used the shoe the same way I did. He's over a gurney, he's over, or not a gurney, over a medical bed, and he's there for 8, 10, 12 hours doing these surgeries. And so when we realized that we have the same use case, that's when the R&D process became so awesome, because every day we would get a new sample, we would test it, and I'd be like, what happened at the end of your 10-hour shift? And he's like, oh, my foot hurt in the front, or no, my heel felt much better. And we were going through that process, iterating as a chef would with making a better dish. You know, it was just really fun.
So it sounds like your product and your line is going to be applicable way more than just to the chef world. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, because they're slip resistant, that's a big part of like what you need in the kitchen. They're pretty specialized and they're out there for the chef. But
Mm-hmm.
when I'm on my feet all day, I'll wear the shoes all the time. And we have a lot of customers who aren't in hospitality. It's about like half of our business, but I think the focus is hospitality, and we'll let the rest of the world enjoy the product because if it's strong enough for a chef, it's got to be strong enough for someone who's at Coachella or someone who's going grocery shopping or traveling or whatever.
Yeah, totally. So at what point did you realize that you were approaching the finished product, and how did that feel?
Ooh. I think the first thing is pretty obvious. We were comfortable in our shoes because that was not happening for the first, because we were, again, like we were trying really weird things. Like, Snibby was like, what if we put a circle on the metatarsal, which is like the front of your foot, which is like this kind of big ball. And it's really good in theory, but like after an hour of it on your foot, you're like, oh my God, I'm like in some of the worst foot pain I've ever been in. And so when I was able to wear my shoes for 12 hours and Snibby was able to wear his shoes for 12 hours, and then my third business partner, who's a high school best friend, is also a restaurateur, when he was able to wear them in his kitchen, we knew we were onto something. But then we found an independent biomechanics facility, and this place puts the robots in the shoes and runs them through treadmills and all these different things. They work with Nike, Allbirds, Dansko, Shoestricers. They work with everybody. When they tested our product and we tested number one of 4,000 shoes tested for insole and midsole resilience, I was like, man, we did it. Like that was when I was like, I'm naming the company after you, Snibby. Like I'm more happy than I've ever been in my whole entire life. Like it was, hundreds of thousands of dollars, multiple trips to China. Like it was the culmination of almost 5.5, 6 years of creating a product from scratch. Like it was that moment that we were like, well, let's go.
That's awesome.
And guess when that moment was? I don't want to spoil it, but guess when that moment was where we decided to go, and guess when we launched?
I'm guessing this was March of 2020.
You've done your research. Could you imagine?
Honestly, I do usually do a lot of research, and I did a fair bit of research, but I didn't see that detail. But the way you asked that question, I'm like, it's only going to end one way.
Oh my God, dude. I couldn't believe it. I was like 6 years of doing this fucking this hard work, and we're launching in the pandemic. And we were in China when COVID was happening, and we're like, what is this?
Wow.
So like no one really knew, but it was, it all worked out. I'm not upset about it, but it was definitely not what I would have planned.
What impact did that have on your launch and business?
Oh man, it was gnarly. So two things happened. One was I didn't want to market a shoe to our industry because it just felt wrong, right? I was the one. I closed 5 businesses during the pandemic. I lost 200 employees. So like I was really feeling it myself, And so what we did was we focused more on healthcare, which healthcare was suffering in a different way, but frontline workers were really, getting a lot of energy at that time, and essential workers. And so you know what? I was like, you know what, Daniel? I have all these shoes. I ordered so many to begin with. I was like, I have a little bit of seed money because we already raised capital. I was like, why don't I just go take my food trucks and go give out free shoes at all these hospitals? And this will give my guys hours. This will feel good about doing something during a tough time. And, we'll earn some goodwill with our customers. And I didn't have any marketing plan. I didn't have any media strategy. I just did it. And luckily someone was, one of my followers worked for ABC and saw it and gave us a bunch of press, and that's how we kind of launched our grassroots marketing.
That's really cool. It's almost like an example of when doing the right thing is also like the good business thing. Like it would have been, I agree, it would have been kind of fucked up if you just launched the business at a time when everybody's like hurting for money, but instead you kind of listened to, for lack of a better term, your heart, and you did the right thing, and it seems like it kind of paid off.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think it's hard to have a long-term view in such a short-term world. And like, I think I had great investors and I had great people involved, and they just trusted me to let me do my thing. And to your point, and I think often when we follow our heart, it leads to good, but we get distracted or we get a little bit blindsided.
Totally. Now, when did you actually start rolling it out to the chef community, and what was the reaction?
So immediately, chefs knew about it, right? Because it came from a chef and stuff. But when we started to like really market to chefs, probably was about 6 months, 7 months after. And the reaction was amazing. I mean, I remember, it's a mixed bag, right? Anytime you launch a new product, you're going to get different things. I think one of the challenging things was that we put a shoe out in the world at the time. It was 135 bucks, and now it's 150. So, and that's different for our industry. And yes, they last 2 times longer, and we have proven facts from scientists about that. It was a little bit different than what people were used to, and so we had to like kind of retrain, like the consumer that understood it. But then I would have somebody who was like, "Hey, man, I've been working on my feet for 25 years, and this is the first time I felt good at the end of the shift." Like something like that, where you're just like, "Whoa!" Like that means a lot. And like I've been in the industry now for 15, so I'm not that new. I might look young, but I'm a little older. I'm still young, and I think that was what was so special about it, was that it was not only a product that looks good and gives back to the community and is sustainable. It actually like makes you feel good, and it's going to be put through the ringer. Like we know that like we can't kind of like, fake the truth about the shoe, because anyone who's going to wear it is really going to wear it to its maximum potential.
Yeah. Look, one thing we like to do on the podcast is get extremely nerdy. So I want to talk a little bit about, first, what do chefs typically wear in the kitchen when it comes to footwear?
So chefs, it depends on the chef. It's funny because if you look at a lot of the executive chefs, they're not wearing non-slip shoes, which is pretty dangerous. It was like me when I was wearing my Vans, because executive chefs have a lot of personality and they're at the top of their game, and they want to showcase who they are through their footwear, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to create the brand. But I think you get a range. You have the lowest hanging fruit, which is our biggest in the space, is this company called Shoes for Crews. You've got Birkenstocks that make a slip resistance. You've got Blundstone, which is kind of like a cult favorite. You got a lot of great brands. Dansko, which is those like Danish clogs. But I think ultimately, like our product is resonating because it's made by chefs for chefs. Like, it's made by workers for workers, but specifically really chefs for chefs. And so I think it's starting to really resonate.
And look, to double click on the nerdiness, I'm actually fascinated in foot health because I've had some foot issues myself. I'm a runner and I've got really flat feet. So I've had to like figure out how to get the right shoe in order to, be able to run. And I just learned too, I was at a panel discussion where Olympian Allison Felix was speaking, and she started an athletic shoe brand that's just for women. And she said on the panel something I had no idea about, was that when a lot of these shoes are designed at these big brands like Nike and Adidas, Reebok, whatever, they're using the model for a man's foot when they're designing that shoe. Like they don't use a woman's foot, even when they're designing women's shoes. So she started an entire line of athletic brands or of athletic shoes designed based off women's feet. And it's a first in the industry. What specifically, when it comes to the foot, are you guys looking to basically solve for when it comes to the very specific work that people in the kitchen are doing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you would think that there'd be like a catch-all like running, right? But like there's different kinds of running. There's like long distance, short distance, sprinting. And I think the same kind of is in the workspace of these people who work on their feet all day. So our first shoe we created was the chef and surgeon shoe by default, because the chef and the surgeon made it, right? And so it's our ultimate chef shoe. It's meant for standing all day. It's a little heavy, but it's got a really dense PU, because as most shoes compress over time, ours doesn't. And so that shoe is really great if you're moving, maybe a mile on a 10-hour shift, which is relatively low. Well, then we realized that servers, they're going like 8, 10, 12 miles a shift. And a heavy shoe, although great for them, is not really the best shoe, because they need more bounce. They need more rebound in their EVA or in the midsole. And so when we learned that, we created a shoe for the server, or a shoe for the nurse, which is slip resistant, but it's super lightweight and it's got ultra bounce in it. And so you learn more and more about each category of worker, and that's why we've created more products. However, I will say that there's a few things that are consistent in anyone who's working on their feet all day. So one of the most important things is a really good heel cut. And you want your heel to stay in place. If your heel moves, it can create a lot of injury. And so a nice heel cup is really important. And then your feet splay. So as you stand on your feet all day, they'll start to swell and they'll start to get wide. And if they're feeling cramped, that's where you lose circulation. That's where you get really uncomfortable. And so all of our shoes have a wider toe box, because that will allow your feet to swell. And then after that, it's kind of nuanced into each shoe, but you typically want, as you're on your feet all day, a denser midsole. So like, a lot of people love, and I'm not going to kind of despair and talk negatively about competitors, but a lot of people love the Hoka. And I look at the hoka and I'm like, if you're running, a hoka can be great because you're bouncing on it, it's quickly, and you're only wearing it for 40 minutes. But when you're wearing it all day, it actually is crippling your foot because your foot can't be strong
Hmm.
in a shoe that's coddling it. And so if you're getting this coddled kind of soft foot, that's what's going to hurt you. Even though it feels great on your foot in the moment, it's going to hurt you long term when you're on your feet. And so it's counterintuitive that a harder shoe is actually better for you when you're on your feet all day.
Yeah. Dude, you don't have to disparage your competitors, but I will say that our podcast co-host, Father Saul, loves his black Hokas, and I'm here to tell him not only is it super unstylish, my dude, it's also going to coddle the fuck out of your foot, bro. Stop wearing them. Stop wearing them. Not you. I said that, not you. Look, so what's going on with Snibbs today? I understand that there's some interesting collabs.
Yeah, man. So we've been working really hard. So I'll tell you, you learn this, whether it's good or bad, but we were product obsessed. It took me 6 years to perfect this product. And every revision, I personally had a huge hand amongst many others in the team to build. And so we launched with this great shoe. And then what's the next step? You got to tell people about it, right? And so we realized like, okay, it's great that we were product focused. And I think every great company starts with that energy. But now it's time to get this out to the world. Like you can be the best podcast host in the world, but if no one's listening, right? And so we did realize that, and we were like, okay, what's the next version of this? And it's like, I love our industry. We've done all these partnerships with great charities, with great communities. I was like, let's start to partner with some of my chef buddies. Like, let's start to partner with the restaurants that we love, with the chef guys that we love, with the community. And so over the course of the next 6 months, we've got 3 pretty awesome collaborations happening with some executive chefs and with a really big brand in the hospitality space. And then from there, we've got some really confidential things that we're working on that are really big in that community. But we like Nancy Silverton. We've been creating a shoe with her, and I love her to death. She's fashion forward. She's an amazing chef with some of the best food, and she's helping us really establish a woman's voice in the brand. And it's not, and we're making this clog that is like the coolest looking thing ever, and it's inspired off of a pasta that we had at a team dinner at Mozza. And so the outsole looks like this one pasta that you can get there. And so like we've been nerding out about it. And like when we went to her house, we took like all these like cookbooks and we took all these pictures of inspiration, and the color that we might launch with, Nancy has to get final say, but is heavy cream. So like, like we're really like diving in. Bianco, we're working on a shoe with, that's really exciting. Headley and Bennett. So just a lot of great brands. But again, LA and this is our community. This is where I'm from. And so it's really nice to be able to establish something of what we care about and who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say your team sent me over a pair of the pistachio clogs, and dude, they're comfortable and they're stylish. My wife is like super into fashion, and I just like wore them like out the other day, and she's like, where did you get those? Like, how do I get some? Like those, like she was into it, man. So from her, and she's a hard compliment to get. So kudos.
I love it. Well, tell her we've got a pair for her. You know someone who can get you one.
No, I'm not. I got to have something on her. She has all the fashionable stuff. This is my one thing, Daniel. Don't ruin this for me, okay?
We're a little teaser, but we're launching Midship next month. Midship is dope. We can get you a pair of those if you want. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, these are really cool colors. Who's your dream, like chef style-wise speaking, to work with?
Oh man, so many. I think what's so cool about chefs is they're so creative, right? And so I remember our first call, Chris Bianco, and I was like, we scheduled an hour, and I think we talked 4.5 hours maybe. And so it was like one of those things where it was like each chef brings so much of who they are to the table, and I have the best designer in the world, and he's really good at establishing a baseline, but really taking in the creative from the person that we're working with. And so seeing that and like who we're working with, I don't know. I'm just like, I feel like every chef has so much to bring, but I think dream chefs, like I really love Jose Andres. There's something about him, and we did a partnership with WCK, and I love World Central Kitchen a lot, and I think they do a lot of good out there. And so I think he would be really amazing. I think Massimo might be really interesting. I think chefs that have a lot of edge are really vibey. Like, Nancy was one for me. Like Nancy, I think is one of the coolest female chefs in the world. She's one of the coolest chefs in the world, but she has so much swag. Like when I see her, I'm like, man, I want to wear that outfit, And so I think we've been really blessed. Marcus Samuelson, he's got this amazing style. Like there's a lot of great chefs out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy is like, whenever you see her, like she is always killing it. Whether you see her around town, whether you see her on TV, like it's always giving, as the kids say. I've got one for you, okay? I want to see a Guy Fieri collab someday, bro.
I would kill for a Guy Fieri pair.
Flavor Town collab?
We designed one already for him when he's ready to talk to us. We're ready to go. We were playing around with some ideas.
No way. I'm assuming flames are involved, but that's just my guess.
Yeah.
Bro, super, super exciting. Congratulations on Snibbs' success. I'm super excited to see where you take this thing, but I want to zoom out a little bit and get to know Daniel, the man behind the clog, a little bit. Mm-hmm. How did you get into this whole cooking world to begin with?
Man, the story's kind of wild. So I've had two passions my whole life, food and fashion. That was it. Like growing up, that was where I wanted to be. My first job was in food. I was a gelato worker, and then I was a busboy and a dishwasher. I worked through the backside of the kitchen. And then I also worked at the store called The Closet with Chrissy Teigen when I was like 15 in Orange County. So I worked in those split worlds. And when I was 20, I went into real estate. That's what everyone was doing in Orange County. It was 2007, 2008 or something like that. And that was when the world was making so much money. And so I thought it was about the money. And I started this real estate services company, and it failed like this. And I had a bankruptcy and moved home. And I said, you know what? Like, I feel like the ambition's there, but like I need to love what I do. And I hated what I did. And so at the time, food trucks were getting big. I had no business being in one, but I really wanted to do it. And it seemed like I had like, I think $7,000 that I saved through the bankruptcy. And I reached out to one of my high school best friends, and came up with this idea. And I asked him to just make the menu, and he wanted to be my partner, and he's an amazing chef. And so together we just made the lime truck. And when I tell you I had no business, like I didn't even know how to turn on the grill. I had no knife skills. Like I had no business being in that kitchen, but because we couldn't afford employees and because we couldn't make a menu consistently, every day we made a brand new menu. And because we were cheap, we had our meat purveyor, and we were like, listen, whatever's on the sell list, like, whatever's kind of like, this restaurant doesn't want this one part of this cow or whatever, just give it to us. We'll learn how to cook it. And so it was an exploratory process every day on that food truck. And that's what helped us get on the Food Network. That's what helped us win Best New Restaurant when we're the only food truck to have ever won that. Like we were doing dishes from $3 up to $100. And so we were having so much fun. And I think it resonated with people, but oh man, like when I tell you it was new, like I was so new to it all.
So it sounds like it was a great education for you though.
Yeah, it was really a great education. I was, and also people are really, especially at the time, people were really forgiving with food trucks. I think as you started to charge more, you had to really be able to stand behind your product. But I think people are willing to let you run out of an item, which they don't want you doing in a restaurant. They're willing to let you try something new. And if they like it, they like it. And if they don't, you've tried something else new. And so it was such a great canvas. And luckily, I had a really great partner, Jason, and he was learning on the job as well. He was definitely further along than I was, but he was so passionate, and he bought me my first knife, and he really was like my chef, and he trained me really on how to get things going. And looking back 15 years of cooking, it's just been a blast.
And this was in like the heyday of food trucks, like when they were just just post Kogi, right? Like everything was blowing up, right?
Yeah, man. Roy was the reason why I got in the business. So it was, I think Roy had started his truck just months prior.
So for people who never had the pleasure or still have not had the pleasure of going to the lime truck, can you walk us through, what were those early days like in terms of the kind of food you were serving? Obviously, it sounds like it was very improvisational based on what you could find, but give us an example of some of the dishes.
Yeah, so some of the classics you might remember from TLT. So like we would do carnitas fries. Like that was the thing we had on our menu every day was the steak taco, which hasn't changed in 15 years and has won crazy awards. And then carnitas fries, which we took off and brought back because we got a lot of bad beef about it. But outside of that, like we were trying new things. Like we would do plated Wednesdays, and we would have real plates with plastic cutlery, and we did like a pork loin or scallops and truffles or oysters 15 ways, and just a lot of really unique things. We did steak tartare Thursdays, but we would always try to play with like one or two tacos, one vegetarian item, hopefully a few different proteins. And so we wanted to make it diverse enough that you had a couple light, couple mid, couple big, and then different types of proteins. But flavor profiles, like we would dip into my culture, Middle Eastern, we would dip into Orange County, which is very like Latin influenced, into Asian influence. And I think the fact that we had kind of this open boundary of where we were, what cultures we were going to pull from, we just got to play. What was interesting is the items that made it onto the permanent menu were things that were executed at a really high level, were consistent, and people love them. And so our menu has evolved to Calimex. But a lot of the inspiration and a lot of the most popular dishes from 15 years ago are the things that have kind of set itself into the menu today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, as you said, the like Middle Eastern or Mediterranean cooking as well. I had this like flashback. Did you guys have some sort of like edamame hummus, or am I making this up?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
That was early days. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that thing was good. That thing soaks up olive oil like I've never seen.
Oh, it was delicious, and the good olive oil too. I remember the olive oil flavor. Yeah, it's weird, the memories that come back through food. So, how did the opportunity to go on the great food truck race on the Food Network come around?
So the first time we were on it, we were just doing our thing. Like we were, again, I think as far as food trucks go, it felt like in SoCal, we were one of the more premier food trucks. And so the first season came out, I think our third week in business. And we were like, man, if they do a second season, we're on it. Like, and I looked at my business partner, Jason, I was like, you're down, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm down. And then like 9 months later rolls by and we get a call from Food Network, and this guy, Jason, who had a really cool food blog, was like, hey, I really rallied for you guys. And I told him how great you are and how funny you are, and that you guys have known each other for a really long time, and you guys yell on the truck at each other. We were like an old married couple, and how great you'd be for TV. And so we interviewed, and they really liked us, and they only let us know 5 days prior, which is the production world, I guess, just really trying to mess with you. But yeah, that's how we got on it.
For people who have never seen the show, can you like walk us through the premise and the types of things that have you do?
This show's so fucked up. So the show's very different. So we went back on the All-Star season, which I don't want to spoiler alert, but they brought the winners back, and then we completed on the All-Star season, and maybe we won again. Maybe we didn't. We most likely did. But the second season, the show is very different. And what we did was we started our food truck in Malibu. So I remember when we drove it from Malibu, and I personally drove that food truck from Malibu to Miami. So we went across the country. It took 2 months. Every week we had a food competition that gave you a huge advantage. And then you would have a selling competition and the lowest sales would get eliminated. So it was a combination of culinary creativity, marketing, really like what makes a food truck successful. And the competitions would vary from, I remember in the last episode, we went kite fishing, which is pretty cool. I've never done it before. And we had to catch a fish and make it into a dish in 25 minutes. So like that was like one of the things we would do. Or one episode we went foraging for mushrooms, which I'm pretty sure Food Network put the mushrooms into the forest. But we went foraging for them, and we made a dish out of that. So like it's just kind of varies from city to city, but super fun.
That is really cool. No, I remember that show extremely fondly. And so, yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, you guys won the first season you were on. You won the second season you were on, right? The All-Stars won.
Yeah.
What kind of opportunities did that open up for you?
It's I wish there was like some Daddy Warbucks on the other end of that Food Network show. It was like, man, you did it, bro. Like, let me give you all this opportunity. But it didn't do that. What it did was it gave us a huge resume, and it allowed me to get my foot in the door in meetings I would have never had once, been able to get. And then knowing from the second season, that's what I learned. And so when we went to this All-Star season, before I even went on it, I was like, whether I win or not, I really want to take advantage of this opportunity. I've had this business for a long time. It was COVID. Everything was crazy. And so I sat there and I said, I want to expand this business to nationally. And I want to do this the right way. And that's why I decided to franchise the business. And so it's taken me a while. I think when you have a legacy brand and you franchise, you want to make sure everything is so dialed in, because every franchise is a representation of me personally, right? It's my business. And so we've been dialing it in for about 3 years, but we're about to start selling them now. And so there's 4 trucks in SoCal that we operate, and we're about to start selling them. And so it wasn't that the opportunity was right on the other side of the door, but it allowed me to really run the playbook that I desired and not feel limited by exposure, reach, or brand awareness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, as we've alluded to, you eventually transitioned from just being a food truck to also having a brick and mortar, TLT, and then later on Hatch as well. And as I've told you, TLT was one of my go-to spots. Absolutely. My brother went to UCLA while I was at USC and after I graduated. And I would come over and we'd always go to TLT and watch. You guys had TVs too. I remember watching like Clippers playoffs game there. Like it was a good time, man. How was that for you transitioning from the truck world to the brick and mortar world?
It was wild. So I think the biggest surprise to me was opening hours. Like you just have to set some hours and then you have to live by them. I was like, with a food truck, you're like, oh, I don't feel like going out today, like whatever, like, and then 86ing items, like, the first day that I was, so to take a step backwards, when I opened TLT, I opened it with a partner. And this partner had a fast casual background. So he was like, hey, Daniel, like these are the things we should do. And he was a great operator. So he was the one coming to me and being like, hey, you can't just run out of items. And I was like, wait, why? Like, it's seasonal. Like it's going to go until it doesn't go. And he's like, no, people like, they love their favorites. Like if they think about something, they want to like come back and get it. Like you need to create some consistency. It's not a food truck. And I think the lesson was that I don't want to say it's a step up because I think food trucks are doing amazing things out there and the food truck business is super dynamic. But I think it's a step towards a more consistent and organized business because I think it's frankly harder to run a restaurant than it is a food truck. And I think people think otherwise because you have to location scout in a restaurant, in a food truck. But I think the consistency is an advantage, but it also makes it more challenging. And then also you are limited by your four walls and what you can do in them and things like that. And so from a chef standpoint, it was easier because it was more consistent. I had a real kitchen, which was really beautiful. I had a walk-in refrigerator. Fun story. So I told you I didn't have experience before the food truck, right? And so I'm used to cater wrapping every hotel pan and every Lexan. And so cater wrapping is where you go under and over so that no matter what happens to that, pan, it can't spill. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing that in the kitchen. And one of my chefs comes up to me and he's like, Daniel, I think you got PTSD, man. Like, the walk-in's not going anywhere. You're not going to turn the restaurant over and everything's going to fall on the walk-in on the ground. Like you could just put a lid on it and call it a day.
Yeah, bro, you say that though, but I bet you that there are plenty of chefs out there that if they had cater wrapped everything, they would have never spilled anything.
It's true. That's true. So I think that was a different nuance. Also, having a dish pit. I mean, that's one of the weirdest things that makes you feel really good. Like in a food truck, it's just this tiny little 3-compartment sink. But and then getting deliveries and not having it take up like 90% of your working space. So there was just like a lot of organization that came from the restaurant, but again, a little bit more challenging to operate.
It sounds like what you're describing sounds a lot like the experience I had when I moved out of like my shitty college apartment to like a real apartment. I'm like, wait, the sink works here? That's crazy, bro. Like that kind of experience. No, but it makes sense to me that like, although you don't have the headaches of location scouting and things like that, a brick and mortar comes with a whole other list of headaches. One question I had for you, which is a little bit of an aside, but I've spent significant amount of time in Westwood. I actually spent a bit of time living there as well. And I noticed like a pretty high turnover of businesses. Is it a pretty difficult neighborhood to do business in?
It's a tough question. I mean, yes, ultimately because of all the turnover. We were one of the first fast casual restaurants. So there was 800 Degrees and then there was us. And we did really well there. And then all of a sudden, on our same block, Simple Things, which I love them, and they went out of business. Tacos 1986, Tender Greens, Creation, Pokeworks. Like there was just like it was like a nonstop, incoming wave of new restaurants. And I think you have such a limited area because there's no parking. So you have UCLA and you have the Westwood businesses, and the Westwood businesses went out and UCLA went out during the pandemic, and I don't know if it's fully recovered. And so it's tough. I happen to love our landlord there. It's, this group that Topa that is big in Westwood, and they were super accommodating and nice. Like, but it was just like the area in itself has a lot of limitations. And I think it was easier when there wasn't, 75 QSR restaurants like in that area. But man, I loved Westwood. I got such a good energy out of that community in that area.
Yeah, it seems like it was the perfect place at the perfect time for you guys as well. Like in terms of like I don't know, the type of food and also like the clientele and whatnot. When I would go, it always felt like a really natural fit, at least.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I love spending time.
How about I want to talk a little bit about your other concept, which is at the Block in downtown LA, Hatch. I read that this was your quote unquote dream restaurant to open.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh man, everything about this place was handpicked, and it's with partners who are incredible, like Chef Eric, my business partner, aka Nara. They're just like vibey guys who come from design backgrounds, so they're very astute to each a little bit of the aesthetic. Like all there's a bunch of photography from Tokyo. Like Nara, my business partner, took it. Like each one of our logos is hand designed and has a story behind it, and like the amount of time and energy that went into each decision. And the way that for me it feels like a dream restaurant is I built the whole restaurant like a runway, and where you sit as chef, you get to see everything everywhere in the restaurant. So I could see everyone's reaction. I could see every dish. I could see all my line that's cooking the food. Every dish has to go by me. And so it might be, again, a little too control focused, but it's just built for, in my opinion, like the perfect restaurant. And it's about 120 seats, which is, I think, really manageable, but big enough that you can make a little bit of money from it too. Because if you go to 40, it's just, you can't make that much money. And so that was really special. And then my favorite thing to do ever is to expo and DJ at the same time, which everyone knows Friday night is just, well, it's probably not as PC as it once was, but Friday night was always Kanye. So I would sing and dance and cook at the same time. And if I felt the energy of the restaurant go down, I would change the music to Madonna, or like I would really vibe it out. And so it became an extension of who I was, which I thought was really fun. And the dishes are really playful, and it's a very special experience. And I knew it wasn't going to last. It doesn't last forever, because like a restaurant is like a time and a place with a person. And like, it was just like if you were there when we were jamming, or you come there when we're jamming, like the energy in there is really electric.
What is one of the dishes that, you're most proud of from Hatch?
There's two. The karage, so the fried chicken. I wrote a rap song about it, so it's out there in the world. But
you don't want to do it for our listeners right now?
So I'll just give you one line, but my other, oh my God, my fried chicken's so good, other chefs harikari, which is when you kill yourself in that terrible way. Yeah. So, and then it goes, I ain't sorry. It's hotter than wasabi. So that's some of the bars from it.
Dude, that sounds like bars.
It was pretty fun. But the fried chicken, so it came off of a menu that was a total disaster. I had this idea to create a menu where things don't look as they appear. And so each thing was like a different color or shape than you would think. And everyone fucking hated it. Everyone was like, dude, this is the worst menu you've ever put together. Like, I was surprised by how much I didn't get any type of good reaction from it. And I think it's because people kind of want to identify what they're eating. And the surprise factor, it doesn't seem to, because you kind of eat with your eyes first, then your nose, and then your mouth. The one dish that came out of it, though, was this karage. And it was 2-day brine Yakitori chicken thighs. It was brine in Thai basil, oranges, shallots, garlic, bay leaves, peppercorn, honey. And then we take it and we fry it in a very special flour combination with bonito flakes. So massive umami, and then squid ink powder and charcoal. And then we ferment black garlic, and we make this really classic ranch. And so it's just a really simplistic but complex dish. And each bite is just bursting with flavor and super juicy, and like, man, and then like homemade pickles. And so it's like the acidity is there, the flavor is there. And I just think that dish is probably the best fried chicken I've ever had in my life. Maybe outside of Bouchon.
Damn.
And then the other dishes are agadashi tofu. And so very few dishes that I went very traditional with. The agadashi, I just take dried shiitakes, soak them in purified water for a couple of days, remove that, and that's the base of the dashi that is in the agadashi tofu. And so just naturally packed umami. And then we fry it in potato starch, very classic. And then we do grated daikon and beet juice, so it's a little bit sweet. And so it's like just the perfect combination of sweet, soft, fatty, umami. And that dish makes I salivate when I think about it.
Dude, you're making me salivate, actually. So it's still at the Block, right, Hatch?
Yeah, still at the Block. Yeah. We got Sick menu, sake, Japanese whiskey, great food, great sticks.
So everybody,
Yeah.
we'll see you at the block, especially after that, after those bars and those menu item descriptions. One thing that sticks out to me about your story, and one thing I actually really admire hearing your story is, you talk about these passions you've had since you were, early on in your life of fashion and food. And it seems like you very much found a way to make that your everyday reality, bringing those worlds together. I think a lot of people struggle with that. What advice would you give to people who are looking to live out the old adage, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life?
I think it's being comfortable with failing. I mean, let me ask you this: how easy was it for you to get your podcast to be as successful as it is?
Just keep doing it. It's honestly like, I think for me, if you love it, you're going to do it whether it's successful or not. You can always do other stuff as well, but if you love it, you just keep doing it. And then if you do it well, to the best of your ability and with your heart in the right place, success will follow. Yes, you got to make some smart decisions along the way too, but just keep doing it if you love it. That's my advice. And I love what you just did there. Flip the question on the podcast host.
I'll add one more thing. So I'll add a little trick that I do because I think it's really helpful for people in that process. But I couldn't agree more because honestly, that's exactly what I would have said. The only other trick I would say is if you really are passionate about something, is to make it really clear to yourself. And so I wake up every morning and I put out what I want to accomplish. I journal about what I want to accomplish. And yeah, I believe in manifestation. I believe in it to its core. But I think outside of the fact that I'm manifesting all the time, this morning I was like, oh, I really want Snibbs to get to X amount of revenue. And then the next thing that it goes is I start to play out how it's going to get there. And I'm like, oh, I need to email that sales opportunity because that sales opportunity is going to help me get to that goal. And I wouldn't have thought about it if I wasn't sitting there in the morning in pure silence thinking about my goal and how I'm going to get there. And so I think being really, once you figure out what it is, waking up in the morning and being like, what am I going to accomplish for that? And then think about it and put yourself in that position and think about all the little pieces that have to follow and then go take action on one of those pieces. The best advice I got from this guy who is this really cool speaker, Boaz. Nuts guy, super cool. Boaz goes, when you feel like you're failing or you feel like you're not where you need to be, do one thing in that moment that helps you get to closer to what your goal is. And in that moment, if you just do one thing, you'll feel so much better versus feeling defeated. And so whether that's sending an email to someone you admire and just saying, hey, I just want to let you know I admire you. And if you ever want to talk about shoes for 15 minutes, I would love to. Or make one more sales email or whatever it is. Like in that moment, if you can just do one more thing, you'll feel so much better.
That's really cool, man. It's true. I feel like sometimes we get so bogged down in the big picture, we forget that like there is so much in our control that we can do. It comes back to control, man. You running around the kitchen, slipping and sliding, and then you made a shoe company out of it. That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. I had a lot of fun being here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for making time for us. It's been truly inspirational. Awesome getting to talk to the man behind the edamame hummus I would have so often in my early 20s.
You know what we're going to do? I should have called that shoe the edamame, the pistachio. I'm going to make an edamame shoe for you.
Oh, shit.
It's going to happen.
Oh, my God.
When I do, I will tell you about it. I'll put the edamame hummus recipe in the box of the shoes.
Epic. Absolutely epic. I'll be getting that as a Christmas present to everybody in my life, so everybody is on notice now. Daniel, as I said, you've been extremely generous with your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Colorado. But if people are looking for you or Snibbs, TLT, Hatch, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I use Instagram, so Daniel.Shemtob, first and last name. And then if not, you just come to my restaurants, come to my food trucks. I'm there a lot. Email me. Whatever it is, man, I care so much about this world. I care about our community, and if I can help, I can help. And, our shoes give back to workers. Like we're sustainable. Like ultimately I want to do good. And if you allow me a chance to do that, I feel like it's an honor.
Hell yeah. Well, as I said, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast. Thanks to Gab Chabran for making the time to go through the headlines of the day. If you thought he was better than Father Saul and you think that he should get Father Saul's job, by all means, dear listener, let me know. Also, thanks to Daniel Shemtob for making the time to join us today. If you can go and visit Snibbs and are looking for some fancy footwear to wear in the kitchen, you could definitely do worse than Snibbs. The LA Food Podcast is produced with the help of Adam Skaggs, Tim Bertolini, and Tiffany Perez. If you like what you heard here today on the podcast, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, leave us a rating, a review, subscribe. Seriously, all that stuff really helps us make our way up the charts on Spotify and on Apple and get our podcast to more listeners like yourselves. We'll be back next week with another epic episode, but if you're looking for me in the meantime, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at the LA Countdown. That's TheLACountdown. Don't forget to sign up for our free Substack newsletter, LA Food Stack, linked in the show notes, and you can also visit us at thelacountdown.com.